Good morning, my dear friends. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to our time together in the study of the book of Genesis. We're in chapter 4, pedaling right along. There's 50 chapters, and so we're getting really close to not just the end of this particular series, but getting close to the end of the book of Genesis. Thinking really hard about going on into Exodus next. Pray about that. We'll see. But it's been a really delightful time. I've really enjoyed. I studied Genesis all my life, but this has given me an opportunity to refresh some things. And honestly, I learned a lot of stuff as we've been going through these chapters. I hope that you have too, a lot of new stuff. So 46, that's where we're at. Here are your questions. And if you want to use those references at the end of the question, you don't even have to listen to me. Those are the questions that we're going to try to answer as we come through chapter 6. By way of review, remember again, we're only starting at 25 because it's halfway through the book, and it's a really iconic character dies, and that's Abraham. And so we'll continue from there on. Hi, Mom. Thanks for joining me. 26. Well, you see all of them here. Let's see. This one's an important one. Well, they're all important, but Jacob's ladder, okay? And then as you move from, 36 into 37, I guess, never mind. You come this way, Jacob flees his family, I want to come over here. I feel like this is an important chapter because Esau gets slighted a little bit. I'm doing a study in the book of Romans also as part of our school biblical studies. And we're about to get to a section where it says that God loved Jacob and he hated Esau. But I think that in that passage, actually referring to the same type of hate that he in another spot where he tells us that we must love our mothers and fathers so much less than we love God that it's almost like we hate them. Hate your mom and dad. I think that's actually what's being said. God does not forget Esau, and it's not to bless Esau. He does. And chapter 36 talks about that. Hi, Debbie, down there in Louisiana. I bet it's cold down there just like it is here. All right, moving on. For that, so that's 36, 37. We got Joseph is going to take over the primary subject matter here. Coat of many colors. You see that. Then we're going to have this little interlude with Judah and Tamar. Joseph's got another little. And then we're going to have Joseph interpret dreams and interpret Pharaoh's dreams. The brothers are going to go down to Egypt. They don't know that it's Joseph. The brothers are going to have to then return to Egypt. With Benjamin because it ran out of food. Benjamin it gets the silver cup put in his bag, and so it looks like he's going to have to stay behind, and Joseph just can't handle it anymore, so he reveals himself to his brothers last time. And boy, that was a powerful chapter, isn't it? But the big climactic moment, or another one of the big climactic moments, is going to come in chapter 46, which is our chapter this morning. Now, you can't see the details, and so I decided I'd blow that thing up for you. Boy, Gabriel did a good job on this one. It's pretty detailed, as I said. Here's the 4. You can see that. And here's the 6. Well, obviously, what we're going to do is we're going to travel to Egypt. But if you can kind of squint one eye and look at the other, and once I explain it to you, you're going to see this. This actually spells Israel. Here's the I. See the little S here? That big thing, that's an R if you look at it. A. And then here's an E on its side, and there's the L, Israel. Wow, Gabriel, that's some real detail. And of course, here's the outline of the country of Egypt. And so as we study chapter 46, the thing that we want to put into our brain is that Israel, that's Jacob, is going to this long trip. He's an old man now, and so it probably was a tough one, but he's going to make his journey down to Egypt, and he's going to reunite with his son. And it's just a marvelous moment because, as you know, for years he felt like his son was dead. He would never see him again, at least in this life. You know, this is going to be a really, really big deal to Dad, that he is all of a sudden he's discovered that his son is alive. Now he's got to wait, however long it took for them to pack up and to move to Egypt, etc. And there's a really, really special verse that we're going to see in this class talking about the moment of reuniting. And you're really going to like it. It's a really special chapter. Here's your memory verse, though. Then Joseph prepared his chariot, went up to meet. This is the passage I saw, so it's a kind of spoiler alert. Then Joseph prepared his chariot, went up to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him and fell on his neck and wept on his neck. I love the way the ESV translates this. And wept on his neck a good while. Yeah. So he collapses into his daddy's arms and he weeps and he cries. And no doubt his daddy did too. And they did it for a good while. Isn't that sweet? Oh, that's good. That's good. But I want to just kind of take you back and remind you what Joseph actually indicated in the last chapter to his brothers, and that is all of the hardship, all of the trials, all that has transpired was for our good. So I could save the family. Now, I know you pedal back in your mind and you remember the day that you sold me off into slavery, and that was wrong, but it had to happen in order for me to get down here so that I could rise to a position where I could save my family. The spiritual maturity of Joseph in this whole thing is just like overwhelming. The example for you and I is even more powerful because I'm one of those big babies. You know, if things aren't just going exactly the way that I want it to, I begin to whine and I begin to complain and sulk and all of those kind of things. And I had never been sold into slavery. I've never been separated by my family that way. You know what I'm saying? I just got so many marvelous advantages that have come my way. And yet it doesn't take anything to ruin Sonny's day. And yet you look at Joseph. I mean, bless his heart, he, by Potiphar, then lied by Potiphar's wife. Then in prison, he gets to a point where he's basically ruling over the entire prison, but then he gets forgotten by the guy he does a favor for interpreting his dreams for 2 years? Finally, he comes out of there, and Pharaoh puts him second in command. And so you just got to watch God work. And sometimes he just doesn't go at the same pace you and I go. And this is a marvelous, marvelous story of how Joseph finally comes to a position where he can save his family. He's going to bring his daddy down there, and they're going to live really good. Choice land, all of that kind of thing. Let's just get into the text, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Chapter 46, verse 1. So Israel, that's Jacob, took his journey with all that he had and came to Beersheba. So on the way, he's going to stop at Beersheba. He's going to offer sacrifices to God, to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in visions of the night and said, Jacob, Jacob. And he said, here I am. Let's pause for a moment. You can offer sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Who's the father of Isaac? Yeah, Abraham. And we got Abraham, Isaac, and then Jacob. We're beginning to see this list of patriarchs. It's very, very impressive, right? And so he's going to pray to the God of his father Isaac. And God, the only God, Jehovah God, is going to speak. And kind of reminiscent of Samuel many years later, remember, as God appears to Samuel when he's a young man, or he speaks to Samuel in the night, and Samuel's not sure what's going on, and eventually he's told to respond, here I am. And so that's what, Lord. Then he said, I am God, the God of your father. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for there I will make you into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I will also bring you up again, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. A lot of good stuff in that verse. Go back and see it with me. I am God. I'm not one of many gods. He is God, Jehovah God. I am God, and I am also the God of your father, that's Isaac, who is also the God of your granddad, that's Abraham. Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt. So this is God's validation moment. It's okay. This trip is going to be fine, And so, as you get older, I'm starting to realize this in my own life. Older, you want to stay close to home. Things that are familiar, all of those kind of things. And so this is a big deal at this age. It's a big deal for Israel, Jacob, to pack up and to move all the way to a different country. Okay, but God's giving him assurance. He said, listen, it's all going to be fine. For there, I'm going to make you. Now, that promise has already been made repeatedly, to Abraham, Isaac, now to Jacob. Originally with Abraham, however, that Abraham, through your seed, the whole world is going to be blessed, and you're going to be made into a great nation. Well, we're beginning to see that as it transpires. But when we take them into Egypt, it seems, God says here, that's when the real multiplication is going to take place and the real nation building is going to happen, okay? And rather sweet, I think, of God, I myself will go down with you to Egypt. Remember, Egypt's a pagan place, multiplicity of gods that were worshipped and all of those kind of things. Now, it's true that Joseph has really set things up well in that he's gone down there as a Jehovah believer and he had a lot of evidence of his own character of life and all those kind of things. But these are Hebrews that believe in the one God, Jehovah, and they're coming down. They're going to be somewhat of an oddity. Okay, God says, "I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with you. I'll go down there to Egypt, and I'll bring you part of the promise that Jacob might not have recognized. Possibly he did, in that God did not promise Egypt to his forefathers, Abraham. He promised Canaan. And so possibly Jacob has in his mind that, we're going to eventually come back here, that I'm going down there temporarily, but someday we'll come back. Now, he's going to find out at the conclusion of this paragraph that he isn't going to come back a live man. But the point is that there never seems to be, certainly in God's way of thinking, there never seems to be this idea that we're going to move to Egypt permanently. Okay? And they don't. And I will bring you up again. So you're going to come back to this land, but notice how it's going to happen. And Joseph's hand shall close your eyes. And so Joseph himself, your son, will be there. In other words, in your death experience, you will have your family around you, specifically the one who you sacrificed all of those years so that he could come down here and prepare the really sweet, sweet blessing of God there. Then Jacob, Beersheba, because remember he's on his way to Egypt. He sets out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel carried Jacob, their father, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to carry them. Now you might recall that Pharaoh had said in last chapter, in 45, when Joseph makes it known that his daddy's up there and he's alive, and I want to bring him down, and Pharaoh said, "Hey, take my wagons. You just take them up there and you bring them back." Okay. And so it was Pharaoh's that brought them down out of Canaan and into Egypt. They also took their livestock and their goods, which they had gained in the land of Canaan, and they came to Egypt. Now, when they showed up, they're going to show up as a small army. They got a lot of stuff. If you understand the number of brothers that we got here, and they got their own stuff, and Jacob's got his own stuff and all that, okay? Jacob and all of his offspring with him, his sons and his sons with him, their daughters and his sons' daughters, a lot of folks. All his offspring he brought with him into Egypt. So they're showing up as quite a caravan. Now here we're going to get into one of those passages where I've got to do the funny, try to read these old names. And so don't laugh at me as I slobber all over myself. You ready? Now these are the names of the descendants of Israel who came into Egypt. Jacob, that's not a bad one. I can get that one. And his sons Reuben, Jacob's firstborn, the sons Reuben, Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Perez, that I don't want to reintroduce that particular story, but you remember that was the one that brought up the whole daughter-in-law issue and how we're going to bring children to him, etc. All right. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamuel. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Puvah, yeah, I like that one, Yob, and Shimron. And the sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, and Jahaleel. These are the sons of Leah, whom she bore to Jacob in Padanaram. I love that name, Padanaram. Together with his daughter Dinah. Altogether, his sons and his daughters numbered 33. So there you go. Now, when you see that number, you say, that's not that. But you got to remember that they've got all kinds of folks that are traveling with them and the livestock, etc. And then, we haven't even talked about, all of the little children and grandchildren, all that kind of a thing. All right, I guess. All right, the sons of Gad, Ziphion, Haggai, Shuni, Esbon, Eri, Arodai, and Areli, I guess. And the sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishbi. Those two, Mom had trouble, they never knew who was getting called to supper. Ishva and Ishvi. Beriah and Sarah and their sister. And the sons of Beriah, Heber and Melchiel. These are the sons of Zilpah. From Laban gave to Leah his daughter, and she bore to Jacob 16 persons. Oh, God says that, 16 persons. The sons of Rachel, Jacob's wife, Joseph and Benjamin. That's why these two guys are so crazy special to Jacob, okay? Because remember, Rachel was his favorite wife. He didn't think he was going to get Leah, and all of a sudden he wakes up with her. Remember that? But Joseph and Benjamin, they were his favorite sons. And to Joseph in the land of Egypt were born Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On, bore to him. And the sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman. How do you say that one? Hi? I don't know. Rosh, Mupim. You gotta like that one. Muppim or whatever. Huppim. That's another one. When mom calls for supper, we're not sure who she said. And Ard. These are the sons of Rachel who were born to Jacob, 14 persons in all. Now, the sons of Dan, Husham. The sons of Naphtali, Zahariel, Guni, Jezer, and Shillem. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Laban gave to Rachel, his daughter, and these she bore to Jacob, 7 persons in all. So there, we slobbered all over that one, but we got through it. Bunch of folks. See what I'm saying? All the persons belonging to Jacob who came into Egypt, who were his own descendants, not including Jacob's sons, wives, were 66 persons in all. And the sons of Joseph, who were born to him in Egypt, were 2. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were 70. Now you see the numbers are increasing. Again, small armies. You know what I'm saying? He had sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to show the way before him in Goshen, and they came into the land of Goshen. Now let's pause here for a moment. Remember what Joseph has decided, actually Pharaoh helped out with this, is that we're going to give my family the land. Now, I don't know if you ever thought about this, but what happens to all the folks who are already living there? I don't know. Did the state, the government, control a lot of land that was just not utilized? I don't know. All I know is that Joseph is in such a position, because God made it so, that when Jacob, his daddy, comes and all the brothers and all their entourage comes, there's a place for him. That's just the way God works. If you're part of his people and you have devoted your life to his work, he's got to take care of you. You see what I'm saying? All right, let's move on then. We're running out of time. Then Joseph prepared his chariot. So they arrived at Goshen. Right? They didn't come into the area where we don't know where Joseph specifically at. And Joseph's going to prepare his chariot, and he went to meet Israel, his father, in Goshen. He presented himself to him, fell on his neck, and wept on his neck for a good while. We've already talked about that. Isn't that sweet? Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die." He said, "It's all good now. Now that I know that you've been okay all these years and that you have survived and done well for yourself, I'm ready to die, since I have seen your face and I know that you are still alive." Joseph said to his brothers and his father's household, "I will go up and tell Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were in the land of Canaan, have come to me. And the men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their livestock, or their flocks and their herds, and all that they have. When Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? You shall say, your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth, even until now, both we and our fathers, in order that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians." So there's an interesting play that's going on here, okay? It's not a lie. They do have a lot of stuff, livestock, that kind of thing, shepherding, all of that is actually true. But it sounds like, as you understand this last part, for every shepherd is an abomination, it sounds like that what Joseph is doing is he is trying to not only give them good land, but make sure that the rest of the Egyptians don't want to be trying to retake the land, because they are abomination. And so it's going to be one of those situations where they maintain their own lineage. rather than, again, I may be reading more of this, more into it than I'm supposed to, but it sounds like that it's almost a pre, it's a prep. God's protecting his lineage from intermarrying with the Egyptians. So they're going to go down there and they're going to build a great nation. But one of the things that's going to happen is that Joseph is going to designate an area. And because shepherds are an abomination to the Egyptians, those folks are not going to be looked upon as individuals that we would marry with. I think that might be part of what's going on here. Well, that leads us then to our 10 questions that we have. And I think we did a pretty good job on those. I think I told you I've got a family member who has been helping me write the questions, and God bless her. It's my sister-in-law, and man, she done a phenomenal job. And I needed help on some of these things. Our schedule is around here, and anyhow, she did a good job. Thank you, Joni. Got him? All right, here we get into the doodle, and chapter 46. Gabriel did a phenomenal job on that, didn't he? I think I've made this announcement before, but I'm going to go at it again. For those of you who aren't aware, on Mondays at 11 o'clock, I am doing a homeschool Bible class live as well. And it's really fun. It's for the kids, but we do a lot of this kind of stuff. We actually draw the doodle and other doodles, and joking and memorizing chapter. It's really a lot of fun. I've got some adults that are watching it too. And I'd like to ask you to join me at 11 o'clock on Mondays and be a part of that. What are we calling it? Basic Bible Homeschool Course, I think it is. Basic Bible Homeschool Course. And even if your kids are not homeschooled in the classical sense, and really that is the classical education throughout history, but anyhow, even if they're not homeschooled in the classical sense, you can still use these. I had some folks just this past weekend use those in our Sunday morning class. And so they're using them in the Sunday class. Anyhow, you can use it for all kinds of things. Take advantage of that, would you? All right, let's go into our prayer request time. And if you've got a prayer request that you would like for us to be thinking about, get in and list it there. Debbie, anything extra? Your family has been on our prayer list for some time, and a lot of hearts going out to them, etc. Let's remember them. While people are putting in their prayer requests, I want to introduce you to the new board of directors for the Missionaries for America program. As you might know, Cindy and I began the Missionaries for America program, I don't know, what was it, 22, 23 years ago. And of course, my dad was a part of that back then too. And actually, Brian was too. He's a little guy at that particular point, but he's matured into a man, has his own family, does a phenomenal job with him. And he's one of our co-directors. But anyhow, Kristen, they live down around Memphis, and she and her husband, Daryl, phenomenal people. In fact, my son is just really tied into them, my youngest son, Gabriel. And they're missionary experienced and actually looking to go back onto the missionary field. But she has agreed to come on the board, and I'm thankful they've elected her to become the vice president of the board. She brings her and her husband are going to bring all kinds of wonderful visionary ideas. So really excited about Kristen and Daryl. My father, everybody had a title, and I thought I need to give Dad a title, so I gave him Sage Advisor. And he does a lot of that. He keeps us kind of grounded and rooted, and I'm so thankful for my dad. He goes all the way back to the beginning of math. And then, of course, we talked about Bryson. Come over here to Kathy. Kathy was part of the very first Missionary for America program team way back in the year 2000. And she was on that team. And she has been with me pretty much basically ever since. And I can't express how deep my love is for this particular woman. But she has also been the one who has pretty well watched over our finances for years and years and years. And if you're a nonprofit, as we are, there's a lot of crazy governmental hoops you got to jump through and stay on top of, etc. And all of those headaches have belonged to this woman. And so very thankful. She was reelected or reselected, I don't guess, to be the MAP treasurer. And I'm thankful that they kept, because, man, where'd that come from? Please forgive me. She's phenomenal. Then my buddy Clayton, one of the most premier interns we ever had at MAP, just a phenomenal guy. And he is the brother-in-law of Kristen. But Clayton and his sweet wife and child are about to move to Honduras. And he called me some recent And he said, so does that mean I need to resign? Absolutely not. We need that kind of an experienced individual. And he is planning to come back during the summer months and help us with the summer program, etc. Just a phenomenal. I'm so thankful that he's on. And there's that ugly me guy. And so if you would, please pray for the new map board, because since COVID and all that, everybody's kind of reinventing them to figure out where they fit in this crazy, weird world, new reality of things. Anyhow, this is the board of directors that's going to do that. We've actually been kind of taking small baby steps for well, last year, all through last year. Last summer was somewhat of a baby step that we took, but this group is going to redesign MAP, and we've got a theme that we must stay with in order to maintain our nonprofit, and that is that we've got to obviously be about sharing the gospel and training others to share the gospel. And that root concept will stay with these 6 board members, but we're going to reinvent it in such a way. I've already got ideas that are flowing that you're just going to really enjoy it. You're going to like this. I think some of you are going to want to jump and help us. And so we got another board this Thursday night. Pray for that we'll have wisdom as we put all this together. But would you please be praying, my dad, Norman, Bryson, Kathy, Clayton, and myself, that we will have wisdom. And there's a ton of other people who are on the peripheral. That shoulder right there, that's Daryl. Okay. And Daryl has been helping us, and Gabriel and Cindy, and on I can go, of individuals. My mom, it brings a lot to the table. So we got a lot of stuff that MAP utilizes as far as brain power and energy and that kind of thing. If you'd be praying that we would use it effectively, that would mean the world to me. All right. I've asked, but nobody has put any other prayer requests out there. So I guess we'll move on. Taking that drink of water, that was given that interim moment for somebody to put, but nobody put it up. It is the Lord's Day. And I don't know, it's been 2 years ago we started this whole idea of the Lord's Day Live. And so thankful that there are so many who utilize this. Had a little bit of a depressing moment this past week. Had somebody, mean-spirited individual, who kind of pointed out that the viewers have dropped, that I don't have nearly the number, and he was exactly right to point it out that way, but he's exactly right that a lot of our viewers are no longer watching us live as we come to you. So I was kind of feeling blue about that until Cindy on Friday, she yelled to me from the living room something that she had discovered. Every Friday, what happens is Cindy puts together our Restoration School of Biblical Studies email, and that goes out to who knows how many. All over the country and around the world, and people are tying into that, and they get the email. And in the email is a link to all of the did that past week, which our viewers are declining. And the guy had to point that out, and I was feeling blue about it. And she said, "Sonny, you need to realize thousands of people actually download your information. They might not be watching live, but they download it later." Meaning that as the world has grown accustomed to live things, I mean, all churches now, et cetera, et cetera. So as the world has grown accustomed to live presentations such as this, they are beginning to back away from the live. But according to the statistics, which really encouraged me, don't lose heart, honey. They are still gaining the information because they're downloading it and using it. And as I've told you, obligation and actually use that on the big screen on Sunday so that they watch me. I'm their preacher, even though I'm not in their state. And there's others who are doing that for their own home services, etc. I'm thankful for that. And so I was greatly encouraged. Thank you for keeping us going as far as financial encouragement as well. I love you. We have been talking about spiritual warfare and training. And I've explained to you about that, what training means. And we're not too far off from getting to that particular segment of our series. But right now we're dealing with spiritual warfare and the whole idea of that which is us and brings us down or tempts us and tries to draw us away from the Lord. We're dealing with that. We're into the 8th of our lessons. Ever feel like this guy? It just seems like life is so much. I just can't get things together. Well, that's what we're dealing with in this series, and I hope that this will be very, very helpful to you. There are the 5 questions that I would hope you would bring to your own personal Bible study and maybe your own home church scenario as we are looking through this topic. And so take a screenshot of that and be ready. Are you ready? Recall that we are now dealing with the whole idea of self. Oh, I forgot to change that. That's not. This is a review from last time. That's a different thing. You'll see that here in just a moment. Okay. But what I want you to see is really the point is self. If we're not changing that, the second area of challenge that we find within the spiritual warfare is ourselves. And James even says that each person is tempted and enticed by his own desire. Sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And I set you up last couple times this way. Remember that Satan is not omnipotent, omniscient, or omnipresent. He doesn't have those qualities of God, but specifically omnipresent. And you can see these passages that make the point that he's not omnipresent. He's not in all places at once. Therefore, some of the things that come your way are not directly related to Satan. I'm not even sure that he's got enough demons to get everywhere, everybody. I think James chapter 1, last passage I showed you, I think James chapter 1 actually indicates that we are, as our own worst enemy at times. And so the devil made me do it. That just doesn't hold up in the court, in God's court of law. Because sometimes it's a lack of self-discipline. And that's why, now it's changed, and that's why we're dealing with self-image in this one. So we've had three of them, okay? And self-control, and now we're dealing with image, and I'll enumerate the three at the end. Is the third key to facing spiritual struggles. So we're into self, and we had all these various selves that we're talking about. The last one is self-image. Now, in order for you to appreciate where I'm going as I've studied this out, to understand this definition. This is my definition as to what I am putting forth as material that I discovered in Scripture in my own study. As I deal with the idea of self-image, I'm saying that a healthy self-image is when there's a melding, a joining, a harmony, a melding of the Spirit of God with the spirit of self. A healthy self-image is not dominated by just one area, and that is me, self. A healthy self-image is dominated by a combination, a marriage, a melding of the Spirit of God and the spirit of Sonny Childs. You've seen these passages before also, but it's important for us to go here. The spirit of self bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. That word with is very, very important, okay? With. So, if the Spirit of God is melding with my spirit, then my self-control is not going to be just Sonny. It's going to be a combination between Sonny and God, which is exactly what happens in Galatians 5. But the fruit of the Spirit is, interestingly enough, self-control. Hold on, I thought we were talking about the Spirit. We are. Because what the Spirit does is it helps us with our, and self-control then becomes an evidence, a fruit of having a relationship with God. And so a healthy view, if you will, of self-image is not emphasizing just me. It's emphasizing me and my marriage to God. That's what makes the self. Galatians 2:20, I've been crucified with Christ, nevertheless I live. And this passage will come up later on, so I'm not going to deal with it right now. But image. And so as I talk about self-image, I'm not talking about a humanistic, just look at me kind of a thing, which our world seems to be dominated by. When I talk about a healthy self-image, I'm talking about an individual that has freedom of choice, free will, and yet that free will has been given over, dominated by, allowed to be controlled by the Spirit of God, the melding between the Spirit of God and the spirit of Sonny Childs. Forgive me for having the word so small, but I wanted to get it all on the screen at one time. So just kind of squint, or I don't know, maybe you can, what is that? You can pinch it wide so it gets a little bit bigger. 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and again, I couldn't get all of it in to kind of take out some of the context, but you need to see it all together. What I want to do is I want to take you to an illustration of an individual who lost his self-image. He corrupted his own self-image. And in the process, he's going to corrupt the self-image of the church as well. And Paul's going to have to call them out with regards to this. But I want to dominate our time by this centerpiece of the passage. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. Cleanse out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump as you really are unleavened. What Paul is saying here is that in order for us to have a healthy self-image, we must maintain a self-image. It cannot be corrupted. Leaven throughout Scripture has often been used as an illustration of corruption, that which just kind of permeates and gets through everything, touches all parts, okay? And so he's saying you need to remain unleavened. One of the things we do, communion service, we eat unleavened bread, okay? Well, keep that theme in mind as we transfer back through or as we go through this particular passage, okay? It's really important that you keep this idea in mind. That's in yellow. It's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind that is not tolerated even among pagans. And the man's going to be with his father's wife. A man has his father's wife, okay? So evidently, and the context seems to, in the original, etc., that this man is not just living with his father's wife, but he's, there's an intimacy that's happening there. And so he has taken to his own bed the woman his dad married. Okay? And so you can see the sickness of that and the perversion of that. But I want you to understand that what we're dealing with regards to the loss of self-image, healthy self-image, is, number one, that there's something happening here that's so that it's even worse than what the pagans would do. Application. When the world becomes our standard, the commander is no longer being followed or being allowed to protect a person within the spiritual battle. That's what happened here. The world became the standard. The sexual pressures, the desires of the libido, all of that stuff took over. And instead of the Lord in control, remember back to self-image, that is a combination of melding of the Spirit of God and our spirit. Those two come together. Instead of that happening, the selfishness of self eliminated the Spirit of God, pushed against it. And so we've got a corrupted self-image at this particular point, okay? One other thing that I think is important for us to recognize just how easy it is to go from one extreme to another and then go to a place where you're even worse off than the pagans. And all this taking place within the church, because that's what Paul's calling out, a member of the church. How can that possibly happen? That just because you're a member of the church doesn't make you somehow inoculated against sin, against the perversions of the world. We've got to continue to maintain the melding between the Spirit of God and our spirit if we're going to survive in the realm of spiritual warfare. Number two. And then he says, and the problem is, folks, you're arrogant about it. In other words, it's not just that this man has gone to this extreme, but you as a church, you have been so arrogant, you didn't even call him on the carpet for it. It sounds like that they were even kind of bragging about it. They were excited about the fact that this guy had his father's wife. And the whole idea of self-image didn't even appear. As a arrogance is born of vanity. Vanity is the greatest threat, I believe, to a healthy self-image. Many Christians alter the temple of the Holy Spirit because they have lost focus of who lives there and who owns the temple. Now, I'm not going to get off on a lot of things there with regards to body changing and all of that. But I think there is something huge in our culture that we're seeing present tense with regards to transgenders. How that, and we've got a president and many in controlling positions right now who believe that we ought to just dilute the whole concept of male and female. And it goes beyond that, okay? A lot of folks are literally trying to change their context. God gave you a body, but they're trying to change it, not just with body markings and piercings and all of that. They're going so far as to try to change their sexuality. They have body parts removed in order to change their sexuality. I believe that some of what's happening with regards to body marking is actually a gateway into transgenderism. That's just my thoughts. But as you understand that, you kind of tie it back to what's happening here. There's a certain area about an individual who's not satisfied with the body that God gave them and has to change it, modify it, and draw attention to it in other ways. There's a certain arrogance about that. And this needs to be challenged. That arrogance needs to be changed, because I'm not healthy self-image and not be thrilled with the temple of spirit that God gave you. Think about that. I'm about to fall over that light there. Moving on then, it's just that they are arrogant. But Paul said, but being arrogant, shouldn't you mourn? I mean, they should have been so upset about this that they actually were weeping because of what was taking place. But instead, they're arrogant about it. That's how worldly they had gotten, because they had lost emphasis on the melding process. They lost the emphasis on making sure that the Spirit of God was joined with the Spirit of them. Instead, the Spirit of them had become dominant. Beware, Satan's prompting to neglect the melding process, which we just talked about, is often so subtle that we end up completely opposite the place we thought that we were. They should be mourning, but instead they're arrogant. Now, let me be pointed. There are many in the church today who have come to the conclusion that they are some kind of supreme examples of Christianity just because they attend 3 times a week in some kind of a sanctified cathedral. And yet, truly, if you look at their lifestyle, there is no be still and know that I am God in their lifestyle. They've turned their children over to the public school system so that the values of the world can be instilled within them. They spend the majority of their life chasing after the almighty dollar. But they have convinced us they go to church 2 or 3 times a week and sit in that sanctified building, how they are okay. They're just like these folks. And what has happened is Satan has suddenly gone into their life, and all of a sudden recognizing that they're completely in the opposite spot than what they're supposed to be. And we got many in the church today. They're the Matthew 7 folks. Lord, did we not sit in our pew? Did we not listen to the sermons? And did we not have our regular potlucks? And the Lord is going to say, depart from me, I never knew you, because you didn't do what I said. What I want you to do is give me true, passionate worship, a true unity between the Spirit, my spirit, and your spirit. But sitting in a pew doesn't necessarily do that. And so they ought to mourn, but they aren't. Instead, they're arrogant, Paul says. Now we're going to get into the fellow himself and what's supposed to be done. Has done this, be removed from among you. They're told to deliver him to Satan. Pretty harsh stuff. Deliver him to Satan. Then there's that whole idea of, little leaven. Leaven's the whole lump. And that's why they're doing that. Don't even associate with them. Not even eat with them. And then he concludes by saying, purge the evil person from among you. See, it's a pretty graphic response, a pretty drastic response to this individual who's lost his own healthy self-image. Withdraw from him. At one point, Paul even says, trouble. We cannot should not underemphasize how it is to maintain a healthy self-image. And again, what is that? The connection to the Spirit of God. Our spirit and his spirit have got to meld together. You can't overemphasize that. So, that said, I take you to the application. The call of a Christian self-image is so serious, it requires a complete quarantine. You see that? Which subject matter you and I can relate to, with regards to this whole pandemic and stuff that has been playing out recently. And so we understand what quarantine is, We understand how it's important to separate ourselves. Why is that? Because remember, a little leaven's going to leaven the whole lump. You let it get started, and it's going to take church today. A little bit of convenient cathedralism has taken to the point that now everybody believes that if you're a good Christian, you're going to some kind of steeple. You're not a good Christian if you don't sit in one every Sunday. And I can't tell you the amount I've gotten on the concept of home church. How can you be a good Christian and have worship at home? And yet that's the New Testament example. You see how crazy we've made it? We've turned Christianity completely on its ear. Never once in all of the Bible, not once in all of the New Testament, does it ever say that they owned a building or tried to invest their money foolishly in a building that sits empty for the majority of the week. Somehow made this the iconic symbol of what good Christianity is. You see, we're completely opposite where we're supposed to be. And so he says, take the drastic measures of turning him over to Satan. Now, it's important to recognize why we're going to do that. I think I deal with that in the next phrase. Deliver this man to Satan for the destruction of the flesh, so that his spirit may be saved. The solution for the corrupted self-image issue is a reprioritization of that which is eternal. Watch it. Here's how we're going to solve the corrupted self-image. We're going to solve it by delivering him to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. So this is the ultimate example, I think, of disfellowshipping someone. They wanted to be like the world. They've identified the world. They talk like the world, etc., etc. The world. Let them see if they can survive in that situation. And the reason that this is so powerful is because what Paul is saying is that you remember what it was like to live without Jesus. At least you should. And remember what it was like to live without Jesus and the horrible conditions that you were in. And you have to go back there because you're being shunned by a church that wants you to be holy and you refuse to be it. You're going to want to come back. I'm regularly seeing, because I got a lot of folks who have dealt with substance abuse and watching their memes, and they post regularly every year. They'll post, I have been 6 years clean or whatever it may be. And sometimes they'll post pictures side by side. And one picture shows them when they were taking drugs, and then the cheeks are caved in and they just look horrible. And the picture beside it, they look very, very healthy. And they say, 6 years I've been clean. 6 years I haven't. But what if that person, because they would maintain holiness, had back there? Would they then come to a situation where they wanted to make sure that they reunited themselves with the Lord because they missed what they had? That's the point of this idea of turning him over to Satan. It's not that we want to lose the person. It's not that we're shunning them to the point that we want to see them go off into hell so that they can, we don't like you because you did certain things. And so, you're hell bound. That's not the point at all. The point is we want to allow them to see the destruction of the flesh. Allow them to see that if you're going to continue to allow your self spirit to dominate and override the Spirit of God, then you're going to be in this mission, and it's self-destructive. So he says, that's very, very important. The reason we did this is so that his spirit will be saved in the day of the Lord. So the idea is to bring him to salvation. And so every time it takes place, it should always take place with the intent, not to punish, but to help the person recognize what they have lost by moving away from the sanctity of the church. So by way of conclusion, then, I'm going to suggest this, and this kind of wraps up the whole idea of self. Next time we're going to look at situation. To effectively deal with the spiritual struggles of self, we must not only acknowledge self-responsibility, we've got also self-control and self-image about today. And the reason for that is very important because it's going to impact both the church and the world. As I end, notice 2 Corinthians 13. I alluded to this in the introduction. We didn't really read it, but Paul is going to say, examine yourselves. So keep watching yourselves, okay? Self, okay? Make sure you keep watching yourself. He's going to say the same thing at communion, that we need to examine ourselves, okay? Examine yourselves to see whether you are in the faith. Are you maintaining the relationship between the spirit of Sonny Chapter? Are those two melding together, maintaining it? Are you staying in the faith? Test yourselves, very much like examine yourselves, okay? You got to stay in the fight. Remember what I said a couple of lessons ago? Your job is not to win the battle. Your job is to stay in the fight. So continue regularly, test yourselves. And then he's going to say, don't you realize that Christ is in you? I mean, how can we lose sight of that? I don't know, but we do. And so this idea is the idea of the melding here, that Jesus is in us, that the Holy Spirit of us. And so the Spirit of Son and the Spirit of God are melding together, okay? And so Jesus Christ is in you. And then he says this, unless indeed you fail to meet the test. And so Calvinists out there who's constantly preaching the once saved, always saved, I would ask you, why Paul say to saved Christians it's possible for you to fail the test? The reason he'd say that is because once saved, always saved is a damnable doctrine from the heart of the devil. It makes you have a level of personal security that God doesn't provide. You provide it from your own selfishness. He tells us we need to be people who recognize that we've got to continue to examine ourselves. We've got to continue to test ourselves because it's possible to fail. How do I keep from failing? You've got to maintain focus on the melding between you and God. His Spirit testifies with my spirit that I am a child of God, Romans 8:16. If you found this lesson to be helpful, it would be helpful for you to be helpful to us. We need your support. Please continue to pray. If you have the means whereby to do it, please add us to your missions giving individually, or take it to your elders and ask them if they would support the work that we are doing. We are not a nonprofit, and so we do not have any of the advantages of the nonprofit. We determined 79 years ago that we were not going to connect and bind ourselves to the rules of the government that way. I want to be able to speak out and speak harshly, if necessary, on things to do with the world. And so we don't have any of those advantages. Everything that comes to us is taxed by the government. Everything. You can send me a birthday gift and I'm going to turn it in as an income, because everything we get goes into that pot to take care of this ministry. We need your support. Please consider supporting us. It's the Lord's Day. And may I ask you, please, to remember the Lord on the Lord's Day. One more time, I'll show you that picture of my little guy. This is Judah. That's not Judah. He's over here. The cardboard box for our communion. This is a very simple approach to home church, but it has been such a revolutionizing impact on our family's emotions to have this time when we come together. There'll be probably 10, 50 that are going to come together today. And as we have these moments and we're going to eat lunch after it's over, and it's really overwhelming. But the centerpiece of our time together, we don't have a sermon or anything. What we have is interactive sharing. And the centerpiece of our sharing every Sunday is, have you had a God moment this week? Share with me how you saw Jesus more vividly. And we always try to do that right before we take the communion, so that our hearts are simplified and right there passionate for the Savior. Keep it simple, keep it innocent, keep it meaningful. It's the Lord's Day. Please do your best to observe the Lord's Supper as he would have you to observe it. I love you. I thank you. Please join me. This is Sonny Chow saying, be there, 1626.